Bhakta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.
Jai.
Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki
Jai.
Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai.
Jai.
Prem Sikaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai.
Jai.
Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shamakunda Radha Kund Giri Govardhan Ki Jai.
Jai.
Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai.
Jai.
Mayapur Navadvip Dham Ki Jai.
Jai.
Ganga Mai Yamuna Mai Ki Jai.
Jai.
Bhakti Devi Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai.
Jai.
Veda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai.
Jai.
Gaura Premanandi.
Hare
All glories to the assembled devotees.
Krishna.
Glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare Krishna.
All glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare Krishna.
All glories to the lotus feet of Sri Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna. Good morning, dear devotees, and greetings from Sri Dham Mayapur.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Today we continue our study of Srimad Bhagavatam. We are in the first canto, 15th chapter. Today's verse is number 43. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Chirabhasa niraharo badhavan mukta murdhajaha darshayan atmano rupam jadonmatta pishachavat anavikshamano niragad asrinvan badhiro yata. Chiravasa niraharo badhavan mukta murdhajaha darshayanat manorupam jadonmatta pishachavat anavikshamano niragad ashrinvan badhiro yata. Chiravasa niraharo badhavan mukta murdhajaha darshayanatmano rupam jadonmatta pisachavat anaviksha mano niragad ashrin van badhiro yata. Please chant.
Hare Krishna. Chiravasa niraharo vadyavang mutta Murdhajaha darshayan atmano rupam jadonmatta pishachavat anaveksha mano niragada ashramana badhiro yatha.
Chiravasa niraharo bhaddhavan mukta murdhaja darshayan atmano rupam jadonmatta pisachavat anavekshamano niragad ashrunvan badhiro yatha.
Chiravasa niraharo Badhavan Mukta Murdhaja Darshayan Atmano Rupam Jodan Matta Pisachavat Anavekshamano Niragad Ashrinvan Badhiro Yata.
Chiravasa niraharo badhavan mukta murdhaja दर्शयन्नात्मनो रूपं जडोन्मत्ता पिशाचवत् अनवेक्षमानो निरागात् अश्रिन्वन् बधिरो यथा.
Anyone else?
Hare Krishna. Chiravasha niraharo baddhavan muktamurdhajaha darshayam atmanurupam jadonmata pishachavat anavikshamano niragad ashrinvan vadhiro yatha. Hare.
Okay. Chiravasaha, accepting torn clothing. Niraharaha, gave up all solid foodstuff. Badhavak, stopped talking. Mukta murdhajaha, untied his hair. Darshayan, began to show. Atmanaha, of himself. Rupam, bodily features. Jada, inert. Unmatta, mad. Pishachavat, just like an urchin. Anavekshamanaha, without waiting for. Niragat, was situated. Ashrinvan, without hearing. Badhiraha, just like a deaf man. Yataha, as if. Translation. After that, Maharaj Yudhishthir dressed himself in torn clothing, gave up eating all solid foods, voluntarily became dumb, and let his hair hang loose. All this combined to make him look like an urchin or madman with no occupation. He did not depend on his brothers for anything, and just like a deaf man, he heard nothing. Report. Thus, being freed from all external affairs, he had nothing to do with imperial life or family prestige, and for all practical purposes, he posed himself exactly like an inert mad urchin, and did not speak of material affairs. He had no dependence on his brothers, who had all along been helping him. This stage of complete independence from everything is also called the purified stage of fearlessness. Translation again. After that, Maharaj Yudhishthira dressed himself in torn clothing, gave up eating all solid foods, voluntarily became dumb, and let his hair hang loose. All this combined to make him look like an urchin or madman with no occupation. He did not depend on his brothers for anything, and just like a deaf man, he heard nothing. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamini Namane Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Pacharni Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatane Om Ajnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Vanchakalpatrubhyas Chakrapa Sindhu Eva Chatitam Panebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Okay, so today we are going to talk about retirement, right? Because this is what true retirement looks like. We talked about retirement a few weeks ago, it might have been a month ago, because we talked about what Arjuna was doing in a similar way. And we talked about how these days, we talked about what retirement looks like. We talked about what it looked like when I was young and people would try to travel the countryside in their Winnebagos, their mobile, whatever they call those things these days, caravans. and they tried to enjoy the things that they couldn't enjoy when they were working because they were too busy acquiring the necessary funds to enjoy such things. And then we also talked about how these days that's almost impossible to do because people are just struggling so hard to make ends meet that there's just no such thing as retirement. And so, but this is what true retirement actually looks like, right? It's not that retirement should be that I struggle so hard to attain some sort of material benefit, and then in the last few years of life, I try to squeeze every bit of enjoyment I can out of it, whatever remaining bit of enjoyment I can squeeze out of this material world. That's not what retirement is supposed to be. That's not supposed to be the goal of retirement. The goal of retirement is to be completely freed from the modes of material nature, completely fixated on the service of Krishna, and just completely finished with this material world. This is what retirement is meant to look like for all of us, actually. Not just, it's not something that we say, well, Maharaj Yudhishthira, he was a pure devotee, so he can do things like that. But I don't think I'm in that realm. No, any aspiring devotee should be aspiring to get to this point of retirement from material life. So, Emperor Yudhishthira, right? He's not just a king. As his title aptly points out, he's the emperor of the entire world, right? He's not just a king or even a king of kings, but he's the king of all other kings in the entire world, right? From sea to shining sea, he was the emperor. And so, but he did that all in the service of Krishna. And in doing that, he had certain facilities that he used, right? You can't be the emperor of the entire world without having certain facilities, right? You have to look the part, you have to dress the part, otherwise certain people won't take you seriously. You have to have access to a whole lot of resources so that all of your subjects can be properly provided for. You have to deal with a whole lot of things. So Maharaj Yudhishthira had a whole lot of material facilities, right? He had a very specific type of clothes and ornamentation. He had a specific way that he got around, right? The chariot, like that. He had a very specific place of residence, right? All these were quite opulent. And so we can say that, he had a lot of facilities, right? Being the emperor of the world, of course, he had a whole lot of facilities. But since each of these things were already engaged in Krishna's service, it was no problem for him to leave it all behind and to do this, to stop eating, to let his hair hang down, to get rid of all of his royal clothes and just put on torn clothes that he found on the ground. I think, did I already say stop eating solid foods? I think I might have. Anyway, and to just completely focus, to give up the association of even his brothers who were also helping him in devotional service. It just came to the point where he took the position of a madman. He didn't want to speak anymore. He didn't want to hear anymore. He just wanted to focus completely on Krishna, right? Which reminds me of Bhishma Dev's last words, which when he was speaking to Maharaj Yudhishthira, now let my thinking, feeling, and willing, which has been so long occupied in different activities and occupations, now be completely focused on Krishna, right? And so Emperor Yudhishthira is now understanding that, okay, Krishna has now left the planet. My service here is finished. I can now move on. And so this is how I do it. I get rid of all of these things. First, obviously, he made sure that he wasn't irresponsible about it, right? He got all of his services covered. He put the empire in the capable hands of Maharaj Parikshit. He made sure everything was going to be taken care of. But then after that, he shed all of his upadhis and just set off to completely focus on Sri Krishna. So got rid of his royal dress again, got rid of all of that. Now, this was not only easy for him to do, but it was completely natural, right? Because he didn't lament over handing over the empire and leaving his ornaments, his wardrobe, his kinsmen, his family, his social status, all the different facilities that he had in order to, successfully maintain the empire. he didn't lament over getting rid of any of those things, because he understood that those things were just instruments in his devotional service. He wasn't attached to those things, right? He accepted them because they were useful in Krishna's service. And as long as they were favorable to that service, he continued to use them. And at this point in his life, he realizes, okay, I can wind up my service now. And so he handed the kingdom over, and he got rid of these things as if they were, nothing, absolutely nothing, just easily walked away from all of them, right? So since he was already fully absorbed in the service of the Lord, this was a very natural thing for him to do. So it was time for him to now wind things up and drop all of the externals. So one of the words in today's verse was jada, dull. This word also comes up several times, but the most memorable is referring to Jada Bharat. So the planet that we live on, known as Bharatvarsha, sometimes people will say that India is known as Bharatvarsha, and that's also true. India is known as Bharatvarsha. But we also understand from the 5th canto that this entire planet that we occupy is Bharatvarsha. It's the bottom part of, it's actually not even all of Bharatvarsha, it's just the bottom 9th of Bharatvarsha. So the very middle island of Bhumandala is called Jambudweep, and Jambudweep is subdivided into 9 varshas, sections. And we're the southern of those. And within that varsha, Bharatvarsha, it's shaped like a bow, a strung bow. So it's straight across, and then it has a semicircular bottom. And so within Bharatvarsha, what we know as what we call planet Earth is just the bottom 9th of that. So an even smaller shaped bow-shaped area. And so it's called Bharatvarsha because King Bharat used to rule it, right? His before it was called Bharatvarsha, I think it was called Ajanaba Varsha, which was, I think, his grandfather. But then this Varsha ended up becoming named after him because he was such a great king. So King Bharat, again, he was also ruling the whole thing, just like Yudhishthir was, right? But before Yudhishthir. And so he was the emperor of the world. And when it became time for him to retire, he did a very similar thing, right? He gave up his royal position. He went to focus on his sadhana, right? On his spiritual practice. But while he was engaging in that process, he noticed that there was a deer who was having some difficulties. And so he saved the deer, right? The deer needed his protection. It's within his realm of being a protector to help the deer. So he did. The issue then became that he considered himself the only protection of the deer and didn't consider that actually the Supreme Lord is everyone's only protector. So due to his conditioned nature of being a king, he wanted to take extra special care of that deer. And unfortunately, it actually cut into his sadhana. So when he would be doing his puja, he would be thinking of the deer, right? So he wasn't thinking of Krishna when he was doing his puja, he was thinking of the deer. And so as a result of that, we know how the story goes. When he left his body, he had to take birth as a deer, right? And so in this form of the deer, he still had all of the knowledge he had in his previous life. He understood, okay, I got to focus up now. At the end of that deer's life, he got another human birth, the son of a Brahmana. And he decided, now I'm going to take this whole thing very seriously. And then he was known as Jada Bharat because he pretended, he was completely self-realized. He pretended that he couldn't speak, he couldn't hear, he just pretended he couldn't do anything. His father tried to teach him Brahminical ways. He tried to teach him how to be clean, and he would just do things completely opposite from the way that his father was teaching him, because he didn't want to have, he didn't want to be affected by society like he was in his previous, second previous life as Maharaj Bharat. He didn't want to chance it, right? So I'm actually just going to read a part of the chapter summary of the 5th canto, chapter 9 summary. So, okay, thank you for pulling that up, Mataji. So, in this chapter, Bharat Maharaj's attainment of the body of a Brahmana is described. In this body, he remained like one dull, deaf, and dumb, so much so that when he was brought before the goddess Kali to be killed as a sacrifice, he never protested but remained silent. After having given up the body of a deer, he took birth in the womb of the youngest wife of a Brahmana. In this life, he could also remember the activities of his past life, and in order to avoid the influence of society, he remained like a deaf and dumb person. He was very careful not to fall down again. He did not mix with anyone who was not a devotee. This process should be adopted by every devotee. As advised by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Asat Sangha Tyaga E Vaishnava Achar, Madhya Lila, chapter 22, verse 87. One should strictly avoid the company of non-devotees, even though they may be family members. When Bharat Maharaj was in the body of a Brahmana, the people in the neighborhood thought of him as a crazy, dull fellow, but within, he was always chanting and remembering Vasudeva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then I'm going to skip down a little bit. Due to his silence, some people who were no better than animals began to tease him in many ways, but he tolerated this. After the death of his father and mother, his stepmother and stepbrothers began to treat him very poorly. They would give him the most condemned food, but still he did not mind. He remained completely absorbed in Krishna consciousness, right? So not distracted in one bit, even though people are mistreating him. He was ordered by his stepbrothers and mother to guard a paddy field one night. So basically they made him into a human scarecrow. And at that time, the leader of a dacoit party took him away and tried to kill him by offering him as a sacrifice before Bhadra Kali. When the dacoits brought Bharat Maharaj before the goddess Kali and raised a chopper to kill him, the goddess Kali became immediately alarmed due to the mistreatment of a devotee. She came out of the deity and, taking the chopper in her own hands, killed all of the dacoits there. Thus, a pure devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead can remain silent despite the mistreatment of non-devotees. Very important instruction there. Rogues and dacoits who misbehave toward a devotee are punished at last by the arrangement of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Right? We don't have to take matters into our own hands. Krishna will take care of it. So the idea is that since Bharat Maharaj, at the end of his life, when he was preparing to just focus on Krishna, since he was able to be distracted, it is thus advised to those who are at the end of their life to follow this example of just be Jada in this birth, at the end of this life. Don't wait to take another birth and then avoid getting re-corrupted by society, right? We should be living our life in such a way that these things will be easy to just give up. And then so at the end of our life, we will just naturally refrain from speaking nonsense, refrain from hearing any nonsense, etc. So for us, because this is the important part, right? For us, we should know that this time will come, and we don't know when, right? The time of death will come. In the material world, everything goes through 6 changes. It is born, it remains for some time, it grows, it produces some side effects, it dwindles, and it dies, right? And so this material body is going to die. We know that, and we don't know when. But we do know that it is in our best interest that before we die, we have to become detached from all of the things that we are currently attached to, right? So it's in our best interest to cultivate devotional service so that each and every aspect of our life is connected to Krishna. That way it'll be easier to shed these things when the time comes. Now we might think, okay, it's easier said than done, right? But we see that Maharaj Yudhishthira, who had every facility in the entire world, was easily able to give them up, right? Just because he engaged everything in Krishna's service. So we, who don't even have that much to begin with, it shouldn't be such a difficult thing to set aside the paltry things that we own, right? But it's, again, easier said than done. Because Maharaj Yudhishthira, he had all of these facilities, but he didn't want them, right? It doesn't mean that he was averse to them. It doesn't mean that he didn't want them. It just means that he didn't have a desire separate from Krishna, separate from his service to Krishna, right? Whereas we don't have much of anything, but actually we want a lot, right? So our attachment aren't to things that we have, it's to things that we don't have, but we really want, right? So we have to purify ourselves of that as well. So, pardon me. In order to follow Maharaj Yudhishthira's example, again, if we use everything that we have access to in Krishna's service, then it won't be a problem letting these things go. But we also have these issues where there are things, as I mentioned, that we want but don't have yet, and we want to attain them. Thus, in the modern scenario, when people retire, they try to get all of those things that they were depriving themselves of while they were engaged in the workforce, right? So we have to make sure that we don't fall into that pattern either. We want to make sure that when it's time to actually retire, that life is winding down, that we should already be situated to the point where we can easily walk away from anything that we have, right? And so the way that we do that, again, it's one of those easier said than done things. But the way that we do that is that we just make sure that we're properly utilizing everything in Christian service. And how do we do that, right? So there are certain things that we do that we know that are connected to Krishna, right? So we got orders from our spiritual masters to chant a certain amount of japa per day. So we know, okay, that's at least connected through the Shastra to Krishna. We may be inattentive, we may be committing offenses, but if we're at least following that instruction and trying to get rid of those offenses by learning about how to do that by reading Shastra, etc., then we're in good shape with that. We also are generally, when we're in the temple, we generally, because we're looking at Krishna's form right there, it's generally fairly easy for us to connect those particular activities while we're in the temple, right, to Krishna. But there are aspects of our life that we just automatically do, right? We wake up and we're just automatically drawn to doing certain things, right? Nobody has to tell us to do them. We just are spontaneously attracted to engaging in some aspect of material nature. So those are the areas that we really have to deal with, right? Because that's where our attachments lie. And the beauty of Krishna consciousness is that all we have to do is engage each of these things in Krishna's service, right? Each of the things that we have attachments to, right? And we've talked about this actually so many times. And this is the basis of Krishna consciousness, understanding how to make our entire life spiritualized, not just part of our life, right? So the aspects of our life where we do not see a direct connection to Krishna, in other words, it's there theoretically. We understand that everything comes from Krishna. So obviously everything we're dealing with is Krishna's energy. But unless we actually see how it is Krishna's energy and use it accordingly, instead of using it to gratify our senses, using it to engage in Krishna's service, until we're able to do that, then we still maintain these material attachments. And therefore, we can't walk away from them the way that Maharaj or Emperor Yudhishthira did, right? So the process is that we have to identify these things, right? So first we identify what are these things that we're attached to. right? It's not that hard to determine that, because it's just, what do I spontaneously do? What are the things in my life that I do not see directly connected to Krishna, but I will do them no matter what? I'll find a way to get these things done. I'm attached to them. I have value in them. I see value in them. So we identify them. Okay, here's an activity that I do. Oh, I'll give an example, because examples are usually way more helpful. So I've already given a few examples in previous classes. I want to try to give a new one. So this new one I will tell you about. It's similar to, I think I told you all about a video game that I used to play long ago, that then made me realize that I very much value sadhu sangha. What a strange way to realize that you very much value sadhu sangha, but it actually happened. But it's similar to that story. There was a time when I was attracted to stories that focused on a very strong community, right? So when I was way younger, these would come in forms of movies, and more recently, but still, almost a decade ago, there was a series of books that one of my neighbors recommended to me, and so I started reading them. And in these books, this very strong sense of community is there, right? And so I became immediately attracted to the very first book that my neighbor lent to me. And then I ended up reading the whole series, right? Thousands of pages, right? So one might say, hey, man, you could have read thousands of pages more of Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, or, the conversations of Srila Prabhupada, the letters, all these things, morning walks, right? Why did you read so many pages of that? And the reason I did is because I was attracted to this idea of community, right? Reading about these people who, in the face of adversity, when everything goes wrong, everyone comes together and helps one another out and figures out a way to solve the problem, right? And we have stories like that in our Shastra, actually, right? But I was getting them from outside sources because they seemed at the time to be more relatable. They were more relatable to my situation, right? Sometimes when we read stories in the Shastra, they seem unrelatable because they happened a long time ago. There were different kinds of people. We think that, okay, well, the reason it worked out back then was because people were just in general much nicer, much kinder. So of course they got along, and of course they supported one another. We live in Kali Yuga, man. The people around us don't give a care about us at all, right? So, we feel like we're in a different sort of situation. And so we feel that we have to sometimes we feel that we have to feed these needs of ours from different areas, because we can't relate to them quite the way that Shastra presents it. So, but while reading these books, I understood that, okay, the reason that I have such a deep admiration for this is because it's needed, this sense of community among the Vaishnavas. Again, it all came down to sadhu sangha, but in a very specific community setting of support. And what sadhu sangha is actually meant to be, it's meant to be that we aspiring Vaishnavas, we all have our own shortcomings, and we also have specific strengths, like areas where we've made improvement due to following the orders of Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. And so we have something to offer to others, and we certainly need other things that others have that they can offer us. So because I appreciate that so much in other realms of not directly connected to Krishna, I understood, okay, I have to spend more time giving support to devotees who need support, right? Because I value it. It's something that I value. It's something that I see as absolutely a necessity in life. And so therefore, instead of filling that need by reading books from, non-devotee authors, or from, again, when I was younger, I would watch movies that would give that same feeling. It's so inspiring when you see people just actually coming together and working to get through a very tough situation, right? Such a powerful thing. And so when I was able to then focus that into devotional service, trying to help devotees when in need, and really coming together in this community sense, then it was so much easier to pull these things then from Shastra and to appreciate them in their direct context, because that's actually the only way they can be properly situated. Because in the material world, even if you find some people who are like-minded and are willing to step out of their comfort zones to lend you a hand, even if you find that situation in the material world, if they're not connected to Krishna, the result isn't actually going to be permanent. It's still going to be a temporary result because we're dealing with bodies, right? But the way to actually get this proper sense of community, this proper sense of supporting one another and helping one another out, is to get it through the Shastra, to understand these eternal principles from the Shastra and apply them properly. So in other words, we don't feed the hungry because they're hungry. I'll give them prasadam so they can benefit spiritually, right? It looks the same. It looks like, okay, there's, these people are feeding the poor, and other people are also feeding the poor. But the thing that Srila Prabhupada pointed out that he made sure was mandatory was that what we give away, it has to be prasad. It has to elevate their spirit as well as their nourishing their bodies. And there should also be kirtan involved. It's not that just we hand out food because we're humanitarians. We give it to them because it's prasad, but it's accompanied by the holy name, right? So multiple senses are being purified through that. And so also one thing that this helped me understand is, so honestly, when sometimes reading Shastra, like I said, we can't fully relate to it because we live in a very different time than when the stories in the Shastra took place. So they're a little harder to relate to at first. But I have found that reading about the pastimes of Srila Prabhupada and his disciples, any of them, honestly, you read any of these books that any devotees put out describing how Srila Prabhupada interacted with them, and you'll see that he was very much also into this idea of community and support, but in its proper setting, not just in a material setting where people are watching each other's backs and helping them get through a tough material situation, but actually supporting one another in a spiritual sense and helping each other grow with eternal benefit, not just some temporary, what do you call it? It's just like a temporary repair like that, not just putting a Band-Aid on something, not just treating a symptom, but actually treating the disease. And so we can get these things by reading about these pastimes. We can see the culture of Krishna consciousness by seeing the way Srila Prabhupada interacted with his disciples and with people in general. We just see how merciful and kind he was, right? And so anything that we find is necessary to us, or anything that we get nourishment from, right? It's actually Krishna coming through these different things that we're going to. So Krishna was coming through these different books and these different movies and showing me things that I should value, right? And that's fine. It's fine that I valued them, right? But the perfection of understanding that is to see how to value that in terms of serving Krishna, right? How to properly put it in its proper place, to actually have this sense of community, right? And so again, these things then raised my awareness of an appreciation of sadhu sangha, which is a very important thing. Okay, so through training, as recommended in the Shastras, by following the instructions of the Guru, the examples of the sadhus, we should gradually but steadily give up our material attachments so that we can be prepared to leave this place for good, right? So gradually but steadily, it's a gradual process, but we also have to be relentless. We have to be steady with it because we have a lot of attachments, right? And we have to be prepared to, at some point, leave them all behind, because each of the things that we have that are attachments here, they're just going to hold us down to the material world, right? We have to understand how everything can be used in Krishna's service, use it that way. That way, when the time of death comes, we understand, okay, I only had these things because I was using them in Krishna service. Now I no longer need them. There's no more attachment. We walk away just like Maharaj Yudhishthira did. No more talking nonsense, no more listening to nonsense, no more eating solid food, no more bothering about beauty, no longer maintaining the nice cloth and all this. It's just you actually want to get to the point where nothing about society has anything to offer us anymore, right? That's the point we have to eventually get to. And so again, the way we get to that is gradually engaging in this process of devotional service and little by little giving up each and every one of our attachments that we see as separate or that we're doing separately from Krishna, right? Because there is no separate from Krishna. It's just a matter of consciousness, right? So when I was appreciating these things in these different types of books and these different movies, it wasn't actually connected to Krishna. I could appreciate them in Krishna consciousness, saying that wouldn't it be nice if the devotees could get along like this? But what I didn't see is how, Krishna actually shows us with Shastra how to properly behave with one another, right? And if we follow that, then we do get along quite nicely, right? And so, yeah, anything can be used in Krishna's service. We just have to have the intelligence, the Shastric backing, the association to properly, successfully be able to do that. So I think that we can stop here and let's see if there are any questions on retirement.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Very good retirement thing you said. But only thing is, as Yudhishthira Maharaj has a gentleman, he could do that. What about ladies? Is there any example for like that?
Yeah, we just had an example of a lady that did the exact same thing. Dhritarashtra's wife is named, remind me.
Gandhari.
Gandhari?
Gandhari. So I can't believe I forgot her name. Very much admire her. Yeah, we saw that she followed her husband, and she did the exact same thing. So the idea is not that we want to follow the detail of this. It's not that, okay, eventually I got to get rid of my jewelry and my clothes, and it's that we have to get rid of the attachment to those things. Even now, while we have them, we shouldn't think this is mine. We should think, okay, this is Krishna's. I'm going to engage it in his service. That way, when it does come time for us to get rid of the things, it's no problem. We're not materially attached to the thing. We're just using it in Krishna's service, right? So then when the time is over, we realize, okay, this body's done. So if I'm not going to have this body anymore, I'm certainly not going to need these clothes anymore. I'm not going to need that jewelry anymore. I'm not going to need that vehicle anymore. I'm not going to need that, the body's not there. We don't need any of these things, right? So we have to get to the point where while using them, we're detached from them, like Emperor Yudhishthira was. He was using all of those things. He had every facility you can imagine, and he was still detached from them, right? We have nothing, and we're attached to things that we don't have. So it's an issue. So we have to work on that. We have to first become detached from the things that we don't have. Understand that if we're meant to get it, Krishna will give it to us, right? The Isavasya principle, that everything is maintained and created by the Supreme Lord. We can just take our quota, and then taking that quota, we have to use it in a very specific way. We have to use it in his service, not just according to our whim. So lady, man, all of us can do that, right? By engaging everything in Krishna's service. So then at the time of death, the details might look different. It may not be that, we untie our hair and stop eating solid foods and start walking north and no longer talk to our siblings and things like that. But we have to be detached from all of these things. It may be that our sibling is sitting right beside us on our deathbed chanting in our ear. That is also very favorable, right? But the point is that we can't be attached, because if we are attached, if there's any bit of attachment, we will come back again, right? And it may be the last life, because wherever we leave off, we pick up again. So it's not the worst thing, right? But it may be a necessary thing. we'd like to not have to do that. We'd like to, our next birth should be where Krishna's pastimes are taking place, so that we can get rid of the rest of our, get the rest of our training, so that we can properly serve with no problem whatsoever in Goloka Vrindavan. Right. So, man, woman, no problem. We have to become detached from all of the things that.
Yeah, detachment, I'm not asking about leaving, whatever clothes or jewelry or what. Those detachments we can do. But for a lady, living alone or taking that kind of thing, he left he just didn't have any connection with his brothers or anything like that. So those things for a lady, what I'm saying is, anytime
okay.
it is very risky for a lady. Is that right?
Yeah, generally when the lady does that, she does it, near her husband, like Gandhari. So, in other words,
If
she
not,
wasn't
alone lady.
interacting. Huh?
If not alone lady, what can she do?
If she
She's with
doesn't
his
have a husband, then what to do is
Yeah.
what she's asking.
If she doesn't have a husband, okay. Well, there's different things that can be done. Traditionally, which it's not encouraged these days because it was actually forced upon some people, and so it's no longer.
Yeah.
But the sati rituals, you can do that if you have that consciousness, but you definitely shouldn't be forced to do that. But there should be some support. So if you have a grown son that can take care of, so in other words, there should be some sort of support. But that's generally what's done. But as long as this detachment is maintained, then at the end of life, no problem. Did that answer the question, or did I not answer the question?
What? I got it.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Mitra Vinda, you have your hand up.
Thank you so much, Carucandra ji. Hare Krishna. I have two questions, and one relates to prasadam. Knowing that it carries the Mahamantra, it carries Krishna's name, it's to be distributed for mercy and the benefit of others. How are we relating this? My question is, should it be decided who receives prasadam and who doesn't? And if so, why? That's the first part.
Okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I'll just answer them in that order. So we can give it to everyone, a prasadam, as long as they'll accept it. That's good. And the chanting, as long as they're not going to become offensive to the holy name, then it's okay to chant. So we would find that Srila Prabhupada, he would hold public kirtans, and then obviously anybody who's averse to it would walk away. Then, after chanting for some time, then he would talk about the glories of the holy name. So you would say, one might say that since he's preaching in public about the glories of the holy name, that he may be preaching to some of the faithless. But the thing is he was chanting the holy name for quite some time, and those who were faithless already, took off, right? And so then he's preaching to those who at least are innocent, generally, right? The glories of the holy name. So we can offer it to everyone. Not everyone will accept it. Sometimes you see when we go on Harinams, there are people who will avoid the devotees, right? So we don't chase after them, of course. We keep going where we're going. We let them run away. If they want to run away, that's fine. So we don't force anyone to take either prasad or the holy name, but we give it to everyone. And sometimes we're a little sneaky with it. Sometimes if we know that someone, say a loved one, for example, if they know that something's offered, they won't eat it, right? Because they think it's somehow tainted, and they think that they're going to be going against their faith or something like that. We can give them some prasad sneakily and not tell them. That's an okay thing to do.
Well, my question is more about like deciding where it goes. Do you know what I mean? Like Lord Chaitanya came to distribute the mercy everywhere, but
Okay.
not as a criticism, but obviously as an observation over, my years of trying to practice, where it goes seems to be selective in what I've seen. And there used to be times when, we had set up kind of everywhere and everyone got, but there were legalities where they stopped free prasadam or food distribution everywhere. So it was more about that. But my other question regards, us not being our bodies, yet, there's the question, or not an issue, of jivas in female bodies becoming gurus formally. We all know that mother is the first guru, so that's already there. That's Krishna given. Yet, as it regards, the organized aspect of our society, it's a struggle. But more than that, the body. We're not our bodies. So what difference does it make? And then if a woman wants to take that position of guru, if she has to have either a husband or a son old enough to take care of her. But again, there's that body issue. And then, if it doesn't speak about whether you're divorced materially or not, because we know swaha is swaha. How does that relate? Because, if a woman is divorced, then she doesn't have, in the material aspects, a husband, or if she didn't give birth to a son or whatever, what have you. There's so many ways that looks like body stuff. You're not your body, but you are your body. And how do we understand that from the perspective that, service is for everyone? And if we're not our bodies, then all services are for everyone. And then, if, you can, and the old time aspects of Shastra, not old time, but understandings and concepts. If a woman remarries, she's a prostitute. So how does that work?
Okay, thank you for the question. So
Thank you.
regarding the not the body but are the body. So we're not the body as long as we're not we're actually not the body, but as long as we're identifying with the body, we're identifying with the nature of the body. So that goes for man or woman, or child or animal for that matter. So if we're identifying with it, then we will go according to the three modes of material nature, right? So Krishna says that the divine energy of mind consisting of the modes of material nature is very difficult to overcome, but those who have surrendered unto me can easily surpass it. So if we're identifying with the body, then it is actually in our best interest to utilize those particular modes of nature and engage those in Krishna's service. When Krishna says that it's better to engage in one's own duty, even imperfectly, than to engage in another's duty, even perfectly, it means that we have a specific nature which is given to us by our previous karma, but it comes in the form of the three modes of nature. And so if we engage in our particular nature, then that's what becomes purified. If we engage in someone else's nature, there's no purification happening. We're just messing around with other modes, right? We're solving someone else's puzzle. It doesn't do anything for our own. So ultimately, yes, if we come to the platform that we understand Shastra, we understand everything as spirit, soul, and we act accordingly, right? We don't act on the bodily platform anymore. Then, yeah, we can give all sorts of instructions to everyone. Everyone can benefit just by observing such behavior, right? So that's there. It's definitely above my pay grade to speak on the issue of whether or not a lady's allowed to give Diksha initiation. I'm sorry, I'm not qualified to speak on that particular matter on either way. But as far as giving spiritual guidance, then absolutely, if one's on that platform, then absolutely they should be preaching to as many people as they possibly can. And every town and village. So to go back to your other point, yeah, we should try to be able to distribute the holy name and prasad everywhere. There are some areas, as you mentioned, where it's actually illegal to do so. And a lot of times that's because of the way that the modes in that area work, right? And so It's just, it's more difficult. So it doesn't mean the devotees don't keep trying, right? In all these different communist countries, there are devotees that are very creatively figuring out ways to introduce bhakti yoga into the society without getting arrested. Some of them actually are getting arrested. But yeah, our deal is, yeah, every town and village, we do our best to do that. We give it to everyone. Not everyone will take it. So we tend to, just like Krishna does, those who are taking it, we tend to give them more attention, right? Like Krishna does. In other words, he's equal to everyone, but to his devotees, he gives extra, it seems like extra reciprocation, right? But actually, he's just reciprocating accordingly. As they surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly. So those who aren't really trying to get that mercy, it looks like, Krishna's not helping them much, but those who are grabbing for that mercy actively, it looks like Krishna's helping them more, right? So it's natural to, if there's an area, like we used to do Harinam basically on either South Street or in, what's that one alongside of the river, Manayunk, right? Manayunk, yeah. So these are areas where people congregate. What's the one they do now? There's some park, something square.
Rittenhouse Square.
Yeah, Rittenhouse Square. So wherever there are people congregating, right? A lot of times we would go to parking lots of concerts at the Vet Stadium and other like that. Basically anywhere there's a crowd. And so, we pretty much would do it. Sometimes we would just do at Christmas time. Mother Saramani would like to go just around the neighborhood where the temple is. And she called them Krishna carols. So we would do Harinam around, and the people would give us candy canes as we were walking by. And so it can be done everywhere, but
Nice memory.
Wherever the success, wherever we have, a positive reaction, we'll tend to go back to those places, unless we're feeling like a soldier and want to really, get those. So it's a matter of that. But yeah, sometimes these things naturally happen. Sometimes it's because of the law. But I mean, I don't know of any circumstances where we're just being selective about it. Maybe there are. Maybe some, but yeah. But that's the idea.
Hi, thank you so much, Chandraji. I appreciate your answers.
And Prananath Prabhu, you also have your hand up, please.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Thank you for the nice class. I just had a comment back on what Mother Vindhyavali had raised, about women, right, going. So I read in the purport earlier when it was given reference to Mother Kunti, and also I think at the end of this chapter where the references are given for Draupadi and Subhadra, that in fact it is explained that Draupadi felt, oh, her husband left, without even caring for her. But since she was so fixed in devotional service, she, wherever she stayed, she absorbed her thoughts in the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and she got the same result as her husband who left home to the north. So, I just felt that was very important, that, even if you're not able to leave home, but because they were so realized and they understood the purpose of their husbands leaving, they stayed where they were, fully absorbed. And Prabhupada writes in the purport, they got the same result as their husbands. Just a point I wanted to add. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you very much for that. Okay. Anything else? Seems like we've hit that time anyway.
So no more hands up. I guess you have clarified everybody's doubts. So
I hope so. I think we're all ready to retire now.
retire.
We're all
when
ready
we are.
to prepare.
Thank you again, Prabhu. Wonderful explanation of the verse. will meet again tomorrow morning at 7:50 for Chaitanya Charitamrita.
Hare Krishna.
Kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhu.
Patitanam Pavanebhyo
Vaishnavebhyo
Namo
namo
Namaha.
namaha.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Chair Chandra Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Okay.
Hare Krishna.